is up, everybody? This is Angles Podcast, the Thursday edition of the Sharp Angles Podcast, featuring myself. I'm Raymond Summerlin, and Mr. Rich Hribar, the Swami of Konami himself. Now, sorry, we weren't here last week, but that's fine. We're back. We're ready to go. We're ready to rock and roll at a new time over here on YouTube. By the way, if you listen to this in podcast form, this is normally done at 11:30 Eastern on YouTube every single week. You can come talk to us, ask us questions. I would be happy to talk with you about that. But we're coming back off a week, 1 week off, coming back, have a special guest, should be joining us soon, I hope. And that is Matthew Berry. Happy to talk to him. But first of all, I'm happy to talk to you, Rich.
Yeah, I missed you last week. Unfortunately, had to deal with some stuff last second, but we're back, and it's the fantasy playoffs basically everywhere. I know some fantasy playoffs like FFPC had like their mini playoffs for 2 weeks that are kind of wrapping up. The big tournament is this week. Stuff like SFB is going on, but like this is like basically everyone is in the fantasy playoffs now. Like all your leagues and regular stuff is kicking off, so it's kind of a fun week, and it's a really kind of a unique slate. I'm curious to see, with all the injuries and all the backup quarterbacks we have this week, how that's impacted. But that's something we deal with every year, and we'll get through it.
Yeah, you say we deal with it every year. This
to degrees.
Yes, there are varying degrees of dealing with it, I suppose, as my therapist would say. And this week is rough. I mean, we're getting it started. If you're listening to this on Friday as a podcast, you already have seen this game, but we're getting it started with just a terrible quarterback battle between Aiden O'Connell and Easton Stick, I liked that we got really excited in the Sharp Football Slack about Easton Stick's rushing total opening at just like 10.5 yards. That's the level of degenerate we've devolved into here in the closing weeks.
We got 4 weeks left,
season.
Man. 4 full weeks left. We can bet on some playoff stuff, but that stuff's under the microscope. People are scouring over that stuff. 4 weeks to full slates of betting player props and playing DFS. We're here. We're at the finite amount.
Yeah, I might. It's at this point now in the season that I might start saving some of that bankroll for the playoffs and getting ready for that. But without further ado, our guest has joined us here. He doesn't need any introduction. I suppose I will do one anyway. He's the host of the Fantasy Football Happy Hour, which you can find as a podcast. You can find it on Peacock. He's regularly on NBC's Sunday Night Football and Football Night in America. He's the founder of Fantasy Life. He has a best-selling book of the same name. You know who this person is. His name is Matthew Berry. How you doing, Matthew? Thanks for joining us.
What's up, Ray? You know what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to scroll so I can find the tweet. You guys tagged me, and it was like this morning, so I can tag people for this thing. You guys should do it because I don't think people – here's what I think about Twitter, and I could be wrong, or X, whatever you guys decide. Yeah. But I don't believe that people generally, like when you tweet it out, hey, coming up in 8 hours, and people are like – I feel like it has to be with like 5 minutes before air. And so –
I don't remember – I will have a tweet tagging you that will go live in like a minute, so we'll be fine on that regard. But I don't think
and I'll retweet
3 minutes before
re-exit whatever it is. I'll do all that, and So, here we go. I got you, Ray. I just see it.
You see, it's magic. Look what I did.
This is me. This is what I do. In case you think I have somebody that runs my social for me, I clearly don't. Because my social.
I thought Denny Carter ran it.
Yeah.
Oh God, I'd be so much better. I'd have so many more followers if Denny ran it. Denny's a genius on social. He's not good anywhere else, but on social, Denny's actually fantastic.
How's the season been going for you so far, Matthew?
You know what? It's been a really good year, actually. And I apologize. I'm in my dressing room here at NBC Sports. We just got done with Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So it seems a little dark. I'm just looking at on the screen here. Maybe I can. Maybe if I pull it closer.
No, you're looking great.
You get that Christmas tree back there.
Yeah, the Christmas tree.
It's with this one little sad Christmas tree that somebody at NBC is just like. It's because it's a fairly empty room and it's not quote my room. It's just on days that I'm here, it's a dressing room for me. But then there are days that I'm not here, and then like somebody who does like our horse racing or our golf coverage isn't here. So it's a fairly bland room that they just threw this like sad little Christmas tree in the back corner. God bless them. So it's been a good year. It's been a good year. Everyone has their misses and their regrets. Actually, my column today, my love hate column today, is all about regrets. And people, it's my annual don't look back and anger column, just about moves that people made. And it's, so I encourage everyone to read it at rotoworld.com. It's free because if whatever move you've made that you regret, I promise you there's somebody else worse. Like you probably didn't drop Devon Achane for a Cameron Dicker, but somebody did that. They showed me the screenshot, and that's in the column. So there's stuff like that. But overall, for the most part, I'm in the playoffs. I think in every league but two. One of which I missed I had third in total points and most points against, and I missed. And then one, I'm in a league that I'm actually in with Rich, where I'm actively tanking. And purposely tried not to make the playoffs, and so I'm actively and if I may say so myself, brilliantly tanking. And so I'm that one is specific. I didn't think I was ever going to make the playoffs in that one, and so that one's it's a dynasty league, and so I'm a big believer. I'm a big believer, and then I'll shut up because I've been just talking nonstop. But I'm a big believer in dynasty that the worst thing in the world is like fifth place in dynasty. Yeah. You either need to go all in or all out. Like you either need to be like, I'm either playing for first pick next year or first place this year. But and we have a couple of teams in our league, Rich, that just feel like they're treading water. And I don't totally get the strategy of some of the guys in our league, but anyway, Rich has a very, very good team in our league that has been beset by like just the worst injury luck I've seen in any of my leagues this year. You had the best team.
Yeah. Unfortunate circumstances. So last year, just side story of this league, 'cause no one cares about your league, but just might
as well. Let's do it.
I almost ran the table. I went 13-1 last year. I lost a game by less than a point to go to ruin it. 13-1. Matthew beat me in the finals. It's winner take all. It's winner take all league. There's no second place. There's nothing else. It's fun. You gotta go hard. And this year I was loaded again, was undefeated. It's a super flex league. I had Joe Burrow. He is no longer playing football.
Well, yeah.
I had Kirk Cousins, no longer playing football. I had Daniel Jones. He's no longer playing football. I had Kenny Pickett. He's no longer playing football. Mitchell Trubisky is my one quarterback this week. I'm in the playoffs, but I'm not going to win. I do not think I'm going to hold down this the first place.
Somebody picked up Nick Mullins for free in that league this morning. I noticed.
I had Nick Chubb. He's no longer playing football.
Rich, it's just been brutal injury luck. It's a 12-team league. 12-team league, 33-man roster league, and so it goes. And then there's IR spots, so it goes super deep. And anyone with a pulse is rostered in this league. I mean, just to give you an idea, just on my roster, I have Taylor Heineke and Sean Clifford are among my quarterbacks, right? I mean,
legend, the Penn State legend, Sean Clifford. Thank you.
I got him in the beginning of the year because, who knows with Jordan Love? Now it looks like he's just backing up Jordan. Now it looks like, Jordan Love's actually legit. But the idea is even backup quarterbacks are rostered in this league. And so the idea that Rich lost 4 starting quarterbacks is insane. And we'll move on to your actual questions, but I just have to give credit here. I am the defending champ. I did beat Rich last year in the finals. I've won 2 of the last 3 years in this league, and it's a real league. It's like Scott Barrett and Graham Barfield and Evan Silva and Pat Thorman and a lot of really sharp, smart fantasy managers. Danny Kelly's in it. I'm blanking on all the names, but it's everyone in there. It's really, really smart and good, and so it's a really highly competitive league. But so last year, Rich had an unbelievable team. He had a better team than me. He legit had a better team than me.
That's fantasy football.
But in fact, I had the best team in the league 2 years ago, and I ended up losing. And I think I lost to Rich, actually. I lost to Rich in the semis, I think, right? But anyway, whatever. The fact is last year, I had a very good team, but it was not as good as Rich's. But going into the final week, I had a lot of my guys pay off. I had Jarrett McKinnon, rode that. It was unbelievable. I have Mahomes and Brock Purdy. I have the Mahomes Kelsey stack in that league. Okay. So going into the final week and going into Monday Night Football, I'm up 62 points. I'm up 62 points on Rich, and I'm done. But Rich has Joe Burrow and Joe Mixon. against the Bills on that Monday night game.
Whoa. You were part of the Rich, you were part of the controversy about what we do with the Bills and Bengals.
Every league dealt with it, but there was, I think, one game where Burrow and Mixon had combined for that many points. So I thought it was just the most honorable and probable thing that was going to happen. That I was not going to win that game.
For our friend
made it easy for the commissioner
and former colleague for both Matthew and I, Patrick Kyren, for his sake, I was rooting against you then, Rich. I didn't even know I was rooting against you, but there we go, rooting against you. Rich and I actually are in a very similar dynasty league to that, a league that I think has made Mike Clay hate me because I randomly beaten him like into Super Bowls with inferior teams. But I've been taking pretty hard this year. But I had Rich last week, and I went all out against you, Rich. I wanted to beat you and knock you out of the playoffs. Unfortunately, my injured team was not enough. But that's neither here nor there. One of the things I wanted to talk with you about is because one of the things I find interesting, one of the things you've done is I think you've really raised the notoriety of the punishment in fantasy football leagues. I think that was a big part of your fantasy life book, was saying what people did to the 12th place team in their league. My favorite I've seen so far is the Waffle House 24 hours. Those of you watching on YouTube could probably guess why I like the Waffle House 24 hours. One, if you want to sponsor me, Waffle House, I'm in to try that challenge. But I assume you're sent these all the time. Are there any fun ones this year you've heard? Any new ones?
I don't know that I've seen any new ones. I get a million of them, and it's hashtag fantasy life, and it's great. I remember when I was writing the book, I was doing research, and I found these guys in Omaha, Nebraska, and they were the original tattoo league, and they're like, the loser of the league has to get a tattoo chosen by the winner. Yeah. And they'd all signed this contract. They were like, a couple of kids had gone to law school, and so I saw this, and they'd done it one year, and I'm like, oh my God, guys, I know this is insane. And they were trying to talk to like some local newspapers. And I said, like, guys, please don't tell anyone about your league. Let me write about it in the column. And I promise you, I know it'll take a year. The book's not coming out for like over a year, but I promise you, I'm going to make you guys stars if you'll be patient and you won't tell anyone. So they did that. And I apologize for the lighting here. Again, I don't know.
Great. No worries.
But at any rate, and so they did that. And so, that was the very first book. The very first story in the book is about that league, the Tattoo League. And we ended up doing a feature on them for ESPN as well. And it ended up working out. And that was like, again, and whenever I would do press, and I did a lot of national press for the book, I'd be like, all right, there's a league in Omaha, Nebraska where the loser has to, where there's a guy that literally that gets a tattoo chosen by the winner. And he's walking around with a tattoo of Justin Bieber on his leg that says hashtag YOLO swag. It's brutal. So I'll run through a couple of the,
it ain't coming off.
Sort of some of my favorites. I don't know that I've seen any new ones this year that come to my mind. But
does that league update you like every year? Do
they disbanded after 6 years, but they did for years. They updated me, and in fact, the year that the book came out, and
I can't believe that league didn't continue.
Right?
Did the last guy who lose, did he get the tattoo, or is that what ended the league? Was the guy was like, no, I'm not getting a tattoo?
Well, here's what's crazy about that league. One guy they did it for like 6 years, and one guy got 3 tattoos. One guy lost 3 years 3 years over the 6. It's unbelievable. And in fact, what happened is that because the year that there was the Justin Bieber one. There was like one that was like a unicorn, like a really very like a young girl, My Little Pony kind of thing. Unicorn, one that said fantasy loser. There was one. If you remember Tim Tebow and the whole Tebowing thing, there was one where somebody took Care Bears. If you remember the Care Bears cartoon, it's Care Bears, and apparently the guy that beat the guy to go to last, they have a last place game, and so the person that got the tattoo is because the guy that won that game used Tim Tebow, and if you remember, Tebowing was a thing, so the tattoo is literally of Care Bears Tebowing, with a knee down. And so there was a couple of them, the Bieber one, and then the year that the book came out, they ended up getting invited on the Tonight Show with Jay Leno, and being interviewed. We sort of made them this viral thing. And so the loser that year had to get this the book came out, I think, in 2013. So Miley Cyrus's Wrecking Ball was a big was a big hit back then. So there's somebody walking around Omaha, Nebraska right now that has a tattoo of the Miley Cyrus Wrecking Ball, Jay Leno's face in the Wrecking Ball, and myself, literally a tattoo of me in the Miley Cyrus Wrecking Ball outfit, with the nipples and the whole thing, riding the Wrecking Ball. And it says, Fantasy Loser 2015 or whatever it was.
That's one I might get, actually. Of all the tattoos you've described, that's one that I might be interested in.
I'll whip through a couple real quickly for you. One of my favorite, if you remember Game of Thrones, and the famous shame.
The two people you're talking to, you never need to ask, do you remember Game of Thrones or any nerd thing? Just this, look at behind Rich. You don't need to ask those questions of us.
Fair enough. So there's a league that recreated the shame walk, this guy had to walk basically in boxers and nothing else, naked through the streets, holding a sign that said "Fantasy Loser," while everyone else dressed in traditional robes and with bells, and they're ringing, shame, 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 and that's on YouTube. That's pretty funny. I've heard of one where I've heard of leagues where they have to sell something. They have to sell lemonade. They have to sell something. We're doing some stuff on FantasyLife.com. We did a partnership with Buffalo Wild Wings this year. We actually have at FantasyLife.com, we have a free last place loser idea generator. Yeah. Like you can go and generate leagues for your last place punishment. And so we're all playing in a guillotine league, basically. And so so far I've survived. We're down to 4, but we started with 18, and every week we've done a different punishment generated by this league punishment generator presented by Buffalo Wild Wings. And this one was pretty good. One of our guys, Rob Wozniak, I don't know if you know guys, Woz NFL, one of our rankers, does a great job for us. He lost, and so he had to go see the Taylor Swift Eras Tour and bring his own food, which was spaghetti. And so he basically, unlike popcorn or candy, he had to eat spaghetti from a bag while watching the Eras Tour and offer it to the other people in the movie. Yeah. Like you might say, do you want some popcorn? But it's spaghetti. It's disgusting spaghetti in a plastic bag. So we've had
It's Always Sunny, right? That's Charlie from It's Always Sunny.
Yeah.
That's a perfect reference.
Yeah.
Again, that is something I might just do on my own, though. I don't that doesn't feel like a punish. I get to watch Taylor Swift and eat spaghetti. That seems like that's a winning day to me.
It's a pretty good day. Pretty good day at the office. The last one I'll tell you, I think my all-time favorite, I don't know that is there was one league where, how like in kindergarten or like grade school, if you go to the playgrounds, they have like the 8-foot hoops, for the little kids. So what this league did is the loser of the league went and had to stand under the hoop, and every other person in the league got to come up and posterize them and just dunk on them.
Yeah.
And they filmed the whole thing, and they put music to it and put it in slow motion. And so I always thought that one was pretty clever too.
Yeah, no, that's a great one too. Good shame. I actually don't have any in my leagues. I never finish last anyway, except for the leagues I'm trying to finish last. Everybody knows that, right? I finished last all the time. I'm actually out of the Scott Fish Bowl already because we were talking about terrible runs. I had Geno Smith and Justin Herbert this week. That went really well. I want to talk a little bit about your love-hate column, which you can find over at NBCSports.com, or as I type in every time out of principle, rotoworld.com, and will for the rest of my life.
Absolutely.
Which I'm glad it still redirects. I'm very happy. I'm very happy about that. But I want to talk about a few of that. But we do have a question here in the chat I want to get to from Stephen Neely, which is, what do we do with CJ Stroud this week if he plays? He talks about, his other quarterbacks, Jake Browning. I kind of don't think CJ Stroud is going to play, but under this premise that he is able to play, what are we thinking we do with him? Are we going to throw him out there? What do you think, Matthew?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think this decision will be made for you, honestly. But I think if CJ Stroud is starting, I'm probably still starting him. I get it. No, Nico Collins didn't practice today either. We don't know about Dalton Schultz. We know Tank Dell is not going to play. And even if Stroud goes, he'll have missed practice time. He didn't practice today. He didn't practice yesterday. So we're shooting this on a Thursday. Having said that, I got to tell you, the Vikings defense to me has played so well recently. And I get it. Browning has been a nice surprise for the Bengals and for fantasy, but it's the fantasy playoffs, and I have to believe in the offense and the talent of CJ Stroud. And I prefer the matchup. This is damning a faint praise. I prefer the matchup with the Titans than I do the one with the Vikings, even though I get it. I mean, like, the Titans have played tough, and they're coming off an emotional big win on Monday night. But I think for me, if Stroud were active, I think I'd have a tough time benching him, even given all the givens. I don't know, Rich, if you feel any differently?
Yeah, I mean, Browning plays on Saturday, and I doubt that we're going to see Stroud cleared before Saturday. So, I mean, that, like you said, the decision's probably going to be out of your hands. Obviously, if Stroud were playing, he's a big reason of why you're playing this weekend, and you would like to kind of play him for the upside that he represents. But, yeah, it's probably a situation that's going to develop into where it's kind of moot what we're talking about.
Yeah, I kind of think that's true as well. And hopefully we find out on Friday and they give us an actual designation. They don't Josh Jacobs us and list him as questionable with no chance of playing. So hopefully we see that. There might be some quarterbacks out there. If you do want to take it to the wire, though, I was actually looking at your love-hate list, and one you have in here is somebody we had planned to talk about today, which was Matthew Stafford against Washington, who is on your love list. And I mean, it must hurt you to have to write about the Washington Commanders defense this year, but I mean, it is what it is. I think there's a lot of reasons to like Matthew Stafford this week, right?
Yeah, look, I mean, first off, the guy's just absolutely balling out. Like, he's playing at a high level with a healthy Cooper Kupp. They're getting the run game going with Kyren Williams as well. Puka obviously has played well as well. So I think just from the eye test, Stafford looks like Matthew Stafford, and now they're at home against my Commanders. Listen, it depends. We could spend the rest of this podcast me just giving you bad stats about the Commanders. I've got a million of them, but I'll just give you a few.
Rich has a fun one I'm going to let him get to afterwards. Okay. There's a really fun one from Rich.
Since week 10, the Commanders allow 24.5 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks, and the last 4 quarterbacks all to face Washington have all scored at least 19 fantasy points. No team in the NFL has allowed more passing touchdowns to opposing quarterbacks than my beloved Washington Commanders. And in fact, they've allowed at least 2 passing touchdowns in 9 of the last 10 games. Ron Rivera is coaching this defense. The last time Ron Rivera was calling plays on defense, other than the week before the bye, maybe a decade ago. Like, what are we doing here, folks? I mean, it's brutal. They're just to answer your question though, Ray, as a Commanders fan, I'm actually I want them to lose this game. I hope they lose the rest of the games. I want a better draft pick. I think they're going to clean house. I think Josh Harris doesn't pay $6 billion for something only to be say like, yeah, let me get the guy that Snyder's had around, who's had a losing record for 4 straight years. No, I think they're going to clean house, and I'm excited about it. The truth of the matter is that it didn't matter to me as a Commanders fan. I didn't care what happened this year. I'm rooting for him, obviously, but the truth of the matter is once the announcement came out that officially Daniel Snyder has sold the team and he's no longer involved, and we've got a professional sports owner in Josh Harris, somebody that has had success in the NBA and the NHL and in his own, obviously his business life, who's very smart and well-respected, both as a professional sports franchise owner and as a businessman. And you bring in Magic Johnson and Daniel Rails and a lot of other very successful people. I'm playing with house money because I really thought I was going to be stuck with Daniel Snyder for my lifetime as the owner. And he's the worst owner in professional sports history. Not the NFL, in professional sports history, and there's not a close second. So we're playing with house money, and so I'm excited about it. And I look forward to Matthew Stafford, who's my QB6 this week, completely lighting them up.
Rich, lay on us your favorite Washington Commander stat that I get to read every week.
Yeah, I told Ray I was never going to leave it out of the worksheet until the streak gets broken. This happens every year, right? Like, we're in the final month of the fantasy season, and there are just some situations that develop every year where, like, personnel, either through injuries or just performance, like, these teams can't get out of, and we get to pick on them, right, for fantasy football. Remember the Houston Texans last year? There was just a point where it was just like every running, they couldn't do anything to stop the run. There was just nothing they could do. And like the Commanders have kind of developed into that team this year. And we just get 4 weeks then. We get 4 weeks left of this 2023 Commanders defense. It's a gift. It's our last Christmas gift that they could give us for this season. But they have allowed every quarterback since the season opener has scored more fantasy points than they had averaged coming into that matchup in that game against the Commanders. And some of those guys got the double dip and scored even more points. Like Jalen Hurts beat his season average the first time. And then when you replayed him again, he scored more points than he had averaged coming into the next matchup. The best thing about the Commanders, too, is they've also allowed 5 straight top 10 running backs. So they have 4 more weeks of this. We get 4 more weeks of this Commanders defense.
That's amazing. That is an unbelievable stat. I love that. I'm going to steal it, but I'll give you credit.
Well, we need Stafford to get there. We don't jinx it.
Oh, he's going to. I mean, I'm at 6. I have Kyren Williams at running back 2 this week. It's amazing.
Yep.
I probably missed that. I check out the worksheet often, Rich. You do such a great job with it. I probably just skipped the Washington one because I already know how bad that is. But I'm thrilled, by the way. For people that are listening and may or may not know this, but your worksheet, I think, is one of the must-read pieces in fantasy football every single week. It's just a beast and a behemoth, and it's one of the reasons why I was so thrilled to get Sharp Football Analysis into RotoPass. So, my company and your company are in business together, and you can. By the way, if you subscribe to RotoPass.com, you get Sharp Football Analysis. You get the fantasy football package, which is all Rich and Ray and the great stuff that you guys do. And you get a number of other great sites. You get RotoViz and Football Guys and 4-4 and Dynasty League Football. And, and you also get, by the way, Peacock. You get 12 months of Peacock, which is exciting because December 23rd, there's an exclusive NFL game that's only on Peacock. And then you also get the exclusive playoff game. There's a wild card game that's only going to air on Peacock, and so that's worth the price of admission as well. Plus, of course, you get Rich's worksheet. And what's great is that even if you buy it now, it's a 12-month subscription. So
nice.
Buy it now, and it'll last until December of 2024. So it'll take you all through draft season and the off season as you're doing best ball and dynasty. So it's good stuff. And
an easy Christmas
gift with you guys. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's a great Christmas gift for sure. Go and make sure you check that out. I do want to talk a little bit because I did see Kyren Williams was in yours as well. Let's just go all the way. I don't know if this is. I honestly don't have a ton of time. I read all of Rich's stuff and that's about it. And so I'm not sure what the conversation is about Kyren Williams, but at this point, CMC lives in a world of his own. We don't talk about him. He's just where he is. But other than him, Kyren Williams, with this matchup, with the other matchups he has coming up, he's definitely the number 2 rest of season running back, right? Is that where we are with him? Is that consensus at this point?
Yeah, I mean, especially because the other guys that might be there, I think, are, the Ecklers of the world, Bijan, everything like that. I mean, I don't know how you just it's an offense that's playing at an elite level, and he's just getting a massive workload. He's my number 2 running back this week. He made my love list because, again, I think, Ray, as we sit here and talk about it, I think you're right. I just don't think people think of him like that. Like, they know he's good,
right. Yeah.
But the idea that I just don't think he's perceived as like this no-brainer top 5, Eckler preseason, CMC, match. It doesn't matter what the matchup is. There's no one you're starting over him other than maybe McCaffrey. Since he returned, he's played 3 games since he returned from injury. He's averaging 25 touches a game, 24.7 to be exact. He's even got an almost 15% target share, so they're using him on all 3 downs as well. Get this, over the last 3 weeks, he has 12 touches in goal-to-go situations. 12 touches over 3 games in goal-to-go situations as well. You mentioned, Rich, as well, that my Commanders give up over 33 fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. It's worse than the NFL. It's like literally pick a stat, any stat, and I've got a bad one for the Commanders. So I do think, in a world that's really surprising fantasy football wise, that may be one of them, is that Kyren Williams, who is a smaller back, has become this crazy workhorse fantasy superstar.
Yeah, you ran like a 4.6 40, like everyone dumped on him, and here we are. McVay just turning water into wine.
Always.
We're almost back. We're almost back to that season. We're almost back to combine season. I can't wait. It's my favorite time of year. It's anonymous scout season. It's absolutely glorious. Let's do one more and then we'll let you get out of here, Matthew. One that I'm interested in, we actually have over at the site, we have a guy that writes up props, and Ryan McChrystal is very good at it. And he's talked about Brandon Aiyuk's longest reception over against the Cardinals. The Cardinals give up a ton of deep catches. Brandon Aiyuk is the guy that you're going to target there on the 49ers. Overall, you're going to like the 49ers defense in this spot, in this matchup, as massive favorites. But you have Brandon Aiyuk on the love list. What kind of specifically about him were you interested in this week?
Yeah, Ryan and I are on the same page here in terms of just especially the deep ball and just how bad Arizona is at defending that. 40% of Aiyuk's targets so far this year have come on deep passes, which we define as 15 or more yards down the field. He's actually got the third most receiving yards on deep passes so far this season as well. Arizona so far this season, 61% catch rate. That's what they're allowing on deep passes this season. That's the most in the NFL. It's the highest rate in the NFL. Yeah. You can throw it deep on the Cardinals, which is what Niners did the last time they played. Aiyuk went, I believe, 6 for 148 the first time they played Arizona. And so, I think Aiyuk has a monster game here. I like him just as long as we're talking about longest reception props. Kind of really like Quentin Johnson over 15.5.
Interesting.
For his reception prop tonight. Last week, he only caught 2 balls from Easton Stick. I think one was 22 yards, one was 57. He's had a reception over 15.5 yards in 6 out of 8 games this year. So, the show that I do with Jay Croucher and Ray, I know you know Jay, over here at Roto World on Fantasy Football Happy Hour. Jay, prior to coming to us here at NBC Sports, Jay was the head trader at a major sports book for literally 5 years. So he was the guy that set the lines for 5 years. He's really, really good. And he just said, as bad as this game tonight is from a, fantasy perspective, of, enjoyment perspective, he said, this is a great game for betting because it's chaos. No one knows what to expect from Easton Stick. Is Aiden O'Connell going to be able to, is he definitely starting? Does he finish the game? He's like, there's just so much, no Keenan Allen. There's just so much variance. He goes, and that's where you can really take advantage. Connor Rogers, my co-host, this is another bet that he gave out today, which I loved. Easton Stick anytime touchdown is plus 500. Easton Stick in college, no one knows who Easton Stick is. Everyone's like, who's Easton Stick? Whatever. Easton Stick had 41 rushing touchdowns when he was in college. I know you were talking, you hinted at this earlier. You guys were talking about the Easton Stick rushing props earlier. All that. I don't think people realize how mobile this guy is. And so on DraftKings, which is our sponsor of the show, they didn't have, at the time of taping, they didn't have any Easton Stick rushing props, but they do have anytime touchdown at plus 500. So we all kind of like that one.
They don't have that up because it posted for 10 minutes and it got nuked.
Yeah.
It posted it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the stick rushing total posted at 10.5, and it got posted in our Slack, and I think every single one of us went and absolutely smashed it. And we got the benefit. He didn't actually run last week, and we don't have a ton of examples of him. I assume most sane people are not watching preseason for DFS like us degenerates do, and so we don't have a lot of idea about who he is. And you're right, he was a runner in college. This is kind of what we expect him to do, and so all of those rushing props are very interesting. On the Quentin Johnson one, we've talked on this podcast about him a lot this year. Is Quentin Johnston at the way that they're using him is not the way they should be, but it is still the way they're using him. They're using him down the field and they're pushing him down the field, even though that wasn't what he was really great at in college. And I think you're right. If they're just going to keep bombing it down the field to him, at least he got one last week. He caught 2 passes in a row. I didn't know. Scientists are still investigating whether that's the first time or whether that could even happen, that he could get that deep pass. He caught it. They had a good connection. It makes a lot of sense to me on Quentin Johnson, especially since you're not going to expect Josh Palmer to go and do that. Keenan Allen's out. The other thing that we're hitting a ton of is Austin Eckler overs and receiving. That's a winning bet, I think, tonight as well.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. We like the over on 29.5 receiving yards. That's what it was. It opened, I think, at 26.5 and moved up to 29.5. And his receptions went from 3.5 to 4.5 as well. But yeah, certainly, the Raiders have a very good defensive line. They do get pressure. I think I want to say off the top of my head, Eckler was targeted 5 times by Easton Stick when he came in last week. And so that was a game that Keenan
Wheels up
there for. So Yeah, we like all the Eckler's overs. I think the public's on that as well. I normally don't like siding with the public. I'm sure you guys don't either, but I think in this case, I think we're all going to be right on that one.
Well, your Sunday night picks have been hot on the pregame. I get to see you on there. It's so just nice to see fantasy football at least illuminated in the capacity it gets to be, explored in the public. I love that you get to be a part of that and kind of expand our game here.
I appreciate that, Rich. I mean, that means a lot to me, and it was one of the big reasons why I came to NBC. I mean, I had a good gig at ESPN. I really did, and it was a really good run there. And they offered me a 3-year extension. I did 15 years there. I could have been there for 18, and candidly, I think I probably would have been there for 20, if not more. But I knew that when I was at ESPN that I was never going to be a part of their NFL coverage. That the way that this is a lot of inside baseball, but in very short, the way ESPN is set up, fantasy and the NFL are very separate kind of silos, if you will. And so, every once in a while you'll have somebody like Field Yates, my friend Field, who technically is an NFL guy. Like again, this is all inside baseball, but in terms of who Field Yates reports to was the NFL side, and NFL sort of loaned him to us for fantasy, whereas I was purely a fantasy guy. And I had a different boss than Field when we both worked there, for example, right? Like Mike Clay and I and Stephon Bell had a different boss than what Field did. And so I just knew that there was just, because of the way that company works, I was never any chance to go to be part of NFL coverage. And then, but my agents were talking to a bunch of people. Hey, Matthew might be available. What would you be interested in? And so we got word that, there were a lot of places that were willing to have me a part of NFL coverage. And so I thought to myself, if I'm going to leave what I think is one of, if not the best job in the industry, right, to be the fantasy guy at ESPN, if I'm going to leave that job, it has to be for something better, right? And it has to be for something that moves the ball forward for the fantasy community and obviously for me personally. And so that was the thing that I thought, that was the only thing that I thought that would, in my mind, was better than ESPN, was being a part of an NFL pregame show. And so when NBC Sports said, we'll put you on Football Night in America, and we'll also be very supportive, and we'll, be supportive of your desire to make, something out of Fantasy Life, and fantasylife.com will allow you to do that. I was just sort of like, let's go. And so it's been great. And so, you have to find your spots. I'm there with a bunch of legends on Football Night, but it's the highest rated football pregame show, and it's before the Sunday Night Football game. And Rich, it's always nerve wracking, right? Because I have to, you guys can appreciate this. I can nerd out with you guys. This is not something I can really get into publicly, but because of the relationship with DraftKings, I have to come up with a parlay.
Yep.
Parlay has to be at a certain level. It has to be at least plus 300. And I have to do it on Friday because they want people to be able to bet it throughout the weekend. So it's one of those things where it's just like, sometimes lines aren't up. Sometimes, there are butts that I like I love this Quentin Johnson over 15.5, but that isn't allowed to be part of a same game parlay on DraftKings. So it's like, you're trying to find these narrow windows for both the best bet and the parlay and the same game parlay. I do 2 different segments for DraftKings during the show, and you have to do them on Friday. So I appreciate, anyway, I really appreciate you saying that. So it's we've been hot lately, and which is great. When you're giving out picks in front of 15 million people, you're just like, oh God, please, please let this hit. And so it's been a good year. It's been a really good year in terms of the picks, and I appreciate you saying that, because it's important to me to leave. One of the things that's really important to me is to leave the fantasy industry in a better spot than I found it, because there's so many people in the industry that have been so gracious to me and so supportive of me when I was starting out. And so now that I've had some success, and I want to pay it forward. And so if there's a way to kind of pave, break through some doors, it means a lot to me. And my hope, and I think we'll get there, my hope is that Football Night in America will not be the only pregame show that has a fantasy and or betting analyst. We're starting to see, we're seeing segments of being integrated into it, but I wish Amazon had their own person doing it rather than just here's Richard Sherman and Ryan Fitzpatrick and Tony Gonzalez giving out a bet that they like that, likely some researcher handed them. I don't know. I'm just assuming that Sherman, Fitz, and Tony Gonzalez aren't sitting there crunching. They're
not grinding the lines.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know we were going to be throwing strays at Richard Sherman. You got to be careful.
No,
I'm just joking. I'm
just saying. In all seriousness, Sherm does a great job. They all do great.
They all do
a great job for what they, but like they're not. I think if they were here on the air with us, they would say like, "No, I'm not a fantasy analyst. I'm not a sports betting analyst. I'm a former NFL player who played the game at the highest level. I'm a Super Bowl champion." In the case of Sherman, and so. It's just not
different.
It's different. It's different. And I'm not saying they don't do the research or they don't know what they're talking about.
But
it's different.
It's a different way to look at things and to try to it's a different kind of skill set when you're trying to analyze. That's actually one of the things that Rich does. We're just going to sell the worksheet. Let's do it. Infomercial time. That's one of the things that Rich does that I actually really like is kind of the blending of these two things. And that's why the worksheet is so good, is that you're blending in like this stuff that you might talk about with coverage schemes and things like that, and why it matters for fantasy. But that's the work that very often fantasy analysts are doing, even if they're not publishing it. Mm-hmm. That is a little bit different than maybe I'm just talking about, hey, the Chicago Bears defense is kind of playing well. Isn't that great? Like you have to go a little bit further and quantify it. And so I think it's true. And I guess, like Rich said, I'm excited to see you on those shows and spreading that. We're going to let you get out of here. You don't have to sit here and listen to us anymore. We really appreciate you coming on. Football Night in America, Fantasy Life, Fantasy Football Happy Hour. You don't need us to promote your stuff, but it's all there. Go and check it out.
I appreciate all that. Yeah, fantasylife.com. Just because I think the people that are watching this show are likely hardcore. A lot of my audience is more a casual player, and so I would just say that I do think that for people that are watching the show, if you're a fan of Ray, if you're a fan of Rich, that I think at fantasylife.com we have the utilization data. First off, I think Dwayne McFarland does a great job. His utilization.
I was going to shout out Dwayne. As soon as you said that, I was going to say if you think that you're a hardcore and you're not reading Dwayne, then I don't know what you're doing. So I was going to shout him out for you.
Great hair too. That. Excellent hair.
Yes, I'm very jealous of him. He violates the "no one can have better hair than me" policy at the company, but unfortunately, everyone does. What I will say is that like. What I was going to say when you were talking about the worksheet, I was going to say I think there are a few seminal columns that I think are must reads every single week that are like at the elite of the elite. And I don't mean disrespect to anyone else in the industry, but just I think the worksheet is one of them. And I think Dwayne's utilization report is another one of them and has been for years. And so I was so thrilled when he agreed to come over to Fantasy Life. But what we've done is at fantasylife.com, we've made not only is Dwayne's column free, but we have a data table where all the utilization data that Dwayne uses that informs his report is there available for free. You can just check it all out. So if you have a question like, what does this quarterback do against man coverage? It's all right there. What does this quarterback do against man coverage over the last 4 weeks on the road? It's all right there. It's all free. And so it's at fantasylife.com. And it's my pleasure. I'm huge fans of you guys, and Rich is one of the legends of the industry, and so happy to spend a few minutes with you guys. I appreciate you guys inviting me on.
Thank you very much, Matthew. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays.
Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. Hopefully you pull off a miracle in our league, Rich. It would be great to win.
It's going to need a Christmas miracle. I'm going to need the Charlie Brown Christmas to come through.
Anything can happen, man. It's fantasy football.
All right. Thank you very much. That was Matthew Berry, obviously legend of the industry. And Fantasy Life. Go and check it out, Dwayne. Everything he talked about. You're gonna get no pushback from Rich and I on that. It's an absolutely great tool.
Dwayne's also a Texas guy, so I see you and him get along real well.
Yeah, the A&M. I'm not an A&M person, unfortunately.
No.
And so we'll have that conversation later. I don't think he and I have actually talked about that. We can have that conversation.
You are a Midwestern Texan, a very unique Unique breed.
Well, my whole family's from Western Pennsylvania, and so I just ended up in Texas by accident, I suppose. But hey, I like barbecue. I cook my own brisket. I'm Texan. Why are you throwing these? Why are you throwing this shade?
No,
At
I
me?
say
Throwing this shade.
it's a perfect blend, man.
So we don't have a ton of time left here on the podcast, but I did want to talk a little bit about the marquee game of the week, Cowboys and Bills, and kind of break this down a little bit. And so you can go read the worksheet for that. You can go read the worksheet for Commanders and Rams, which is a game, by the way, you need to be paying attention to, in my opinion. All of that's at sharpfootballanalysis.com. You can get the fantasy package or the NFL Plus package, which includes fantasy, for 15% off using promo code ANGLES at sharpfootballanalysis.com. Go and check that out. But one of the interesting things about Cowboys Bills, and you kind of mentioned it a couple times on the worksheet, is some small concern about this game actually hitting enough for DFS. It's tied for the second highest total of the week with Rams Commanders, not coincidentally. And you're kind of worried about, are we actually going to hit that total? Is this an under game? Are we not going to get where we want to go for fantasy? Why is that?
Yeah, I think from an individual player perspective, there's concern. From a game total perspective, I can see angles because I do think the Cowboys side is appealing still. Like, I feel like their team total would be the way I would bet this. I think they probably outright win this game too, even though they're dogs. But the Bills just have so many injuries. They have patchworked this together, and they've been good. I mean, you look at the last 6 games, they're only allowing 6.3 yards per pass attempt. That's 8th in the NFL. But they are 26th in touchdown rate over that span. They're 22nd in rate of pass attempts to go for a first down or touchdown. And what they've been able to do to kind of mitigate some of their losses, personnel-wise defensively, is they've still been really good at getting pressure. And the one thing that hasn't mattered to Dak Prescott is he's by far the NFL's best passer under pressure. I mean, the league rates for pass completions under pressure is 49.3. Dak's is 63.9%. League-wide average under pressure is 6.1 yards per pass attempt. Dak is at 8.4 yards per pass attempt. He leads the NFL in both those categories. So I do have some confidence still in the Cowboys side getting there. What I have trouble with is the Bills side. And like Josh Allen's probably going to, from a fantasy perspective, not bury you. He's not going to lay an egg. Although, Jalen Hurts did against Dallas not get there last week. But, you look at Josh Allen and what the Chiefs were able to do and how he performed under pressure. He's completed under 60% of his passes in 3 of his past 4 games. All it takes for him is just to have a game where he doesn't get a rushing touchdown, right? Because we take some of that for granted. We've taken it for granted for Jalen Hurts for his whole career. Literally, Josh Allen, he's got 10 rushing touchdowns. But if there is a week where he doesn't have a rushing touchdown, then he has to do extra lifting through the air. And is this a matchup where he can have a 300-yard passing game, where he can have 3 to 4 passing touchdowns? And that's probably in the lower end of probability, especially when you look at his splits under pressure, how he performed last week when the Chiefs under pressure, and you look at how his receivers win. I mean, who is beating man coverage on the Buffalo Bills right now? It's crazy to think, but it's not Stephon Diggs. I mean, Stephon Diggs is averaging his lowest yards per route run against man coverage he has since he joined the Bills. He hasn't gone over 100 yards in 7 straight games. He's had 3 single-digit PPR point games in his past 4 games. And we know Gabe Davis isn't beating man coverage. He's got 1 of his 6 touchdowns against man coverage.
We always play the game. Gabe Davis week or not Gabe Davis week. This is not Gabe Davis week, which means probably he'll have 130 yards and 3 touchdowns. But this is not Gabe Davis week.
Yeah, so it's really hard to diagnose because I look at this from like an evidence-based lens when I'm breaking down these players. And it's hard to find objective angles for the individual Bills players outside of just saying, hey, Josh Allen gets there, right? Yeah. Like, it's hard to find a lot of evidence to say that the Bills players all have a lot of upside. They're one player that is possessing upside, James Cook, they don't utilize. So
refuse to give him the ball. They would rather use Ty Johnson and Latavius Murray in the second half for some reason. They don't even give him the ball. Give James Cook the ball. How about we start there? That might be step 1.
Yeah. I mean, so it's really hard, but I do think the Cowboy side finds a way there. I mean, them being dogs and only having a 23-point implied team total feels almost disrespectful. Maybe they thought Buffalo was going to have bad weather. I've seen it's supposed to be in the 40s and hey, that's football weather.
Yeah, it is a bit confusing to me as well. But what I will say is, I mean, we've seen this Bills team even if the record hasn't shown it, we've seen this Bills team play very well, push the Eagles to the brink, should have won the game against the Eagles, beat the Chiefs, although we don't know what the Chiefs are at this point. I think the one really interesting, and you brought him up, the one really interesting kind of fantasy situation for the Bills is Stephon Diggs. And you mentioned we've seen this change and he's not going over 100 yards. And one of the things when I dig into his numbers that's very interesting is so many more of his targets now are coming near the line of scrimmage. His average depth of target, and you could see when the change happened, it happened before the coordinator change, and it has just continued on with Joe Brady. But his air yards per target was 11.9 over the first 7 weeks. It's 6.9 over the last 6 games. That is a noticeable difference. That is a massive change to the way they were using him. His intermediate targets have dried up. They've just essentially turned into short targets. You would expect that to increase the catch rate, but that hasn't happened either. And I was actually watching the Cover One guys who cover Buffalo well. I was watching the Cover One guys talk about it, and they think defenses are just taking away Stephon Diggs because they know that Gabe Davis isn't beating them, and Dalton Kincaid is averaging 4 air yards per catch, and Khalil Shakir, even though we like him, is probably not beating him. Dawson Knox is probably not beating them. They refuse to give James Cook enough carries to beat you. And I wonder, is that just going to be what we have for Diggs the rest of the way? And if that's the case, I mean, it's going to be a massive disappointment from what we saw for him through those first 7 weeks.
Yeah, it's also an extremely hard game to stack from a DFS perspective, from because everyone's expensive. Stephon Diggs' price has not changed in DFS. I mean, he's the second highest priced wide receiver on DraftKings this weekend. He's still 8,400. It's hard. I'm sorry, third, because Tyreek and CD. But it's hard to build around this game because you got 2 expensive quarterbacks, 2 expensive receivers. Tony Pollard's in a limbo zone, and then the ancillary guys are kind of whack-a-mole-ish. I mean, if Brandon Cooks scores a touchdown, he's fine. If he doesn't score a touchdown, he's useless. That's kind of how Gabe Davis has been. And then you've got kind of Jake Ferguson, and it's really it, man.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough out there on those DFS streets.
Because
you have a couple questions.
It's a 4 o'clock game. It's a 4 o'clock game. It's got the highest total. We're supposed to be drawn to this.
Yeah, that's why I will be stacking nothing but Rams and Commanders. So come and join me. Come and join me in that game. Actually, please don't do that. So I
meant to ask Matthew on his way out if Brian Robinson didn't play, if it was a Gibson or Chris Rodriguez game.
Oh, it's a Gibson game. I feel confident in the Gibson situation. We do have a few questions here in the chat I want to go through real quick. One from Rockets 2008, after my own heart. We're coming back. The Rockets are coming back. Picked up Stafford today. Played Fields over Mahomes last week. Start one quarterback, I assume, out of those 3 quarterbacks. That's, first of all, wild that this is a question at this point in the season, but it is a valid question. Rockets 2008. That's where we are with Patrick Mahomes at this point. So out of those 3, I don't remember which one you have ranked higher. Who you're starting?
I actually have Stafford ranked the highest out of those guys. So yeah, I have Mahomes ranked the lowest.
It's wild. What a season we've had for quarterbacks. And then we have here from Dino Fontaine.
And that's props because I imagine a lot of Mahomes teams aren't playing this weekend.
I would suspect that if you're talking about advance rate and Best Ball Mania, or if you're talking about just regular redraft fantasy leagues, if you spent a 3rd round pick on Patrick Mahomes, it probably hasn't gone great. Yeah, I think that's fair. What about all right, we have Dino Fontaine here. If A-Chain is out, would you play Palmer, Higgins, or McLaurin? I don't think in that situation I'm playing Palmer because you have 2 similar options. And so you're not going to play Palmer tonight. You're going to let it ride and see what we get out of A-Chain. Between those other 2, I mean, McLaurin doesn't catch passes anymore, and Higgins doesn't have a great matchup. I don't know. What are you doing?
Yeah. I mean, I would just, my tiebreaker would literally be to play McLaurin based on game environment. That would be, just they're going to have to throw. And anytime you see a guy like McLaurin have a 0 catch game, you kind of always think dude, that was brought up in meetings this weekend.
There was some squeaky wheel. So there's a squeaky wheel to Terry McLaurin For sure. All right, let's get on to Uncut Gems. We talk about a player too that's probably going under the radar, that's in an advantageous spot. I actually have a different Commanders wide receiver for mine, but we're going to let you go first with your Uncut Gem. Who do you got?
Yeah, I've got the Odell Beckham, man. Odell Beckham.
He's
If you've
back.
got
We're back.
if he's been picked up in your leagues, if you picked him up like when he was starting to get some utilization, or if Mark Andrews got hurt, like this is your time. I mean, he's been a top 36 scorer now in 4 of his past 5 games. He's been a top 20 scorer in 3 of those. What you got to like too is that the Ravens are like conscientiously calculating like how much they're playing him. But when he's on the field, they're dialing up plays to him. I mean, he ran a route on just 56% of the dropbacks on Sunday, and he hasn't hit a 60% route rate in a game since week 9, but he's been targeted on 41% of his routes, 41.7, 33.3% of his routes over his past 3 games. He's getting 55%, 30%, 41% of the team air yards in those games. Since week 9, only Tyreek Hill averages more yards per route run than Odell Beckham. We were turning the clock back, and he's just got this good matchup on Sunday night against a Jaguars team that is 28th in yards per target allowed to outside wide receivers, 29th in touchdown rate. So if you had a Keenan Allen, if you or just like you said, it had a T. Higgins like the other gamer had, like just guys that you can't trust, and fire up Odell this week.
Yeah, and he was on my short list for this as well. And like, I think the one concern you have is the fact that he's not getting as much playing time as you would want, but they're using him when he's out there. And so at some point you just have to trust that this is a purposeful, and whenever he's on the field, they're going to use him and get his targets. I kind of feel the same way about mine, who is Curtis Samuel, because Curtis Samuel is also, for the Commanders, not playing a full complement of snaps. He's still running fewer routes than McLaurin. He's still running fewer routes than Jahan Dotson, but he leads the team in targets over the last 2 weeks. He's been targeted on at least 24% of his routes in every game since week 7. He has a 30.1% target per route rate over that span, which is a very high number. And what we talked about a lot today on this podcast, we didn't expect it to be Commanders and Rams heavy, but here we are. The Commanders are probably going to need to throw in this game. Their defense is probably going to get lit up by the Rams. And if that happens, then Samuel's going to get targets. And the Rams are weaker towards slot receivers. They've given up 8 yards per target to slot receivers. My 2 concerns with Samuel, if I was going to play him, is, he's running fewer routes, as I said. And also the Rams don't get as much pressure as the Dolphins and Cowboys, these 2 kind of blow up spots that we've seen from him. And pressure does play some role in how many targets Samuel is getting. But like I said, we now have longer than these 2 games, a long run of Samuel getting a lot of targets per route. And so, especially in PPR formats, I'm feeling pretty good about him this week.
Yeah, that's the game, man. That's the game we're looking at.
That's ours. I wonder if that's going to be written up in your Saturday DFS game call stack. We should put that up front, right? Like, there's no doubt about what's going to be in there for sure. You can check that out at sharpfootballanalysis.com, part of our fantasy package. Use code ANGLES to get that for 15% off. Go to YouTube, search for Warren Sharp. If you listen to this on a podcast, you can watch this live every single Thursday at 11:30 Eastern. Make sure you do that. And we'll be back to talk to you soon. Come and join us again next week.